Thank you everyone for coming for today's digital health. Oh, no, you guys are missing. Today's digital health seminar series featuring Phil Kunovski from KYMIRA, and today he's going to be telling us about from research to revenue, academia, industry, collaboration, and entrepreneurship. Is that going to change? So just a few housekeeping things. If you are here in the room with us, could you please register your attendance on the tablets that are going around. The webinar will be recorded and made available online. And so for anyone that is here online, please stay muted during the presentation. There will be extra time for Q&A at the end of the talk. For online attendees, use the Q&A functionality, the chat, or put your hand up to ask a question. Traditionally, it is all done at the end, but Phil, you did say earlier that you prefer an interactive.
I'll let people ask while I'm doing it.
Ask questions whenever you like. Cool. Okay. So Phil has spent over a decade in the startup and scale-up environments, especially in emerging technologies such as Internet of Things, wearables, e-textiles, and smart garments. He has served as Executive Director, Chief Technology Officer, and most recently, Chief Financial Officer. And Phil has significant experience in leading and funding research, new product development initiatives, collaborating across academia, public healthcare, and industry. At KYMIRA, he has been involved in securing non-equity diluting grants to accelerate research and development, and has supported the founder CEO through several rounds of equity investments. So thank you for coming from Reading today, and please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Right, yes. So I'm here to talk a little bit about how you get from research to revenue, moving from academic work to industry collaboration. So hopefully I'll be able to share some insights that'll be helpful for everyone. It is quite a broad topic, so I have tried to hit on some key areas, not go particularly deep in anything specifically. This would hopefully give us an opportunity to have a bit of a dialogue. I don't like to just hear myself speak for the next 30, 40 minutes. It would be good to get a little bit of input. So that's the plan. Hopefully we'll all leave here with some fresh insight and perspective. And so I always like to talk a little bit about sort of myself and my background. You've heard a little bit of my bio, the sort of top level, almost LinkedIn-y way that people present themselves. But I usually like to start a little bit from the beginning. So how I started my journey in this and sort of what got me to where I am now. So like I think many people that are here in person online, I started as a techie. So I studied electronic engineering and cybernetics at the University of Reading. And it was one of those things where, you know, I went into something that I was passionate about, engineering, science, and business, entrepreneurship, all of those things were almost a different world. You don't really think about it really when you're really into your tech and really into that focus. And it was one of those things that I didn't really know what I wanted to do after the degree. I'm sure a lot of people have been there. And it didn't happen until my master's year at university that I got struck by the entrepreneur bug. So essentially the way that happened was there was an easy, or at least what I thought was going to be an easy 20 credit module offered by the Henley Business School on Reading University campus, and it was called Practice in Entrepreneurship. And the syllabus was pretty simple. Go in, listen to speakers, not unlike a little bit what we're doing here, talk about their experience in finance and business. And I thought, great, something I can do on a Thursday morning after Wednesday student union, right? So it was one of those, and I went there and it was fantastic. It was something that I didn't realize what an inspired and sort of interesting world that could be. And so the rest of my master's year, I went through it, did my course, did my big project and all of that. But as we got to the end of the degree, myself and another engineering colleague, we decided we'd start our first business based on an idea and based on a little bit of the research we were doing as part of our master's degree. That's how we justified using all the equipment, 3D printers and all of that fun stuff that the university happily provided for us. But essentially, I remember quite vividly on the day of graduation, once we went through the ceremony and we're like, right, okay, now let's go back and get changed. We basically went back to our shared accommodation and registered our business name on company's house. Quite classic. It was very exciting. And then the next 2 years was us basically learning about it all, and more importantly, what not to do when you start a business, which was fantastic. It was a great learning experience. I consider it a bit of a success. If anyone is interested, they can look on my LinkedIn profile, and there's a little bit of what we did there, which was quite fun. But it was one of those that it came to the end of that first business, and again, I found myself thinking, gosh, what am I going to do with myself? It's been a wild ride. Am I an engineer? Am I techie? Am I now business? Well, I like that. So I did what most people do in my situation, and I started a PhD. And by happenstance, I also met another Reading alum who had this crazy idea about developing fabrics and clothing that did a little bit more than just sort of keep you warm or make you look good. And essentially, this is where I joined KYMIRA. So the founder was studying animal sciences, and he was looking at infrared textiles in clothing to enhance cellular wound and recovery. So mainly for wound dressings. But essentially, he decided that one way to sort of get it on the market really quickly was to look at sportswear. Right? So he was also an avid rower. So he thought, okay, wound dressings, going to take me a while to get there. So let me start selling something on the market. And I joined because we had the crazy idea of, hey, what if we also put electronics and sensors and made it wireless, etc. And this was back in 2014, 2015. So Fitbit was sort of a thing, more or less. Google Glass was a bit funny, and most of the market didn't really get into it. But it was something that we thought, right, let's give it a go. And that's sort of where we started our journey. And so it's been about 10 years. Over that time frame, we've had multiple collaborations with industry and industry, academia and industry. Off the top of my head, it's very hard to say, but over 20. We've had several rounds of investment, as has been mentioned, and we've also had several grants, which are great because they're basically free money, basically do and advance your tech. And so when we started, we had a vision, we had an idea, no money, no context, no clue. And 10 years later, we've got more of a vision. We know exactly a bit more what we're doing. Money's always going to be an issue, but we're getting there. And so what I'm here to share with you is a little bit about the insights I've gathered from trying to form collaborations with academia and so forth. And so I tried to break it down and structure my presentation in these 4 key areas. As we sort of said in the beginning, what I'd like to do is give a bit of insight and knowledge on these areas, and then maybe give an opportunity for people to ask questions on the specific topics. Don't be shy. Speak up. Anything that resonates with you, anything that doesn't resonate with you or challenges your beliefs, more than happy to have a bit of a conversation. Obviously, we can have a bit more of a Q&A at the end, but because of the variety of topics, I don't want any great ideas or great questions to be lost in the ether. Does that sound good to everyone? Yeah, brilliant. All right, so let's get started. Academia and industry. So, seems like an obvious place to start, but what is the difference between how academia fundamentally thinks and how industry fundamentally thinks? So I've got a few words up there. So in academia, things are knowledge driven. So mainly you're doing something for the science or advancing the state of science, normally over a long-term impact. So thinking in terms of years and decades, and that how can the work that's being done now and the knowledge being generated now affect the future generations and what have you. The currency, as I like to call it, of academia tends to be publications. So it's about putting your work out there, getting it seen by as many people, sharing that knowledge with as many people as you can. And a lot of the time, the audience is your peers, people who are likewise as interested, fascinated, passionate about the work that's being done. And that's in stark contrast, actually, to how industry think, or fundamentally how they approach things. So things are mostly more application-driven, so less about the underlying technology and more about, okay, how can it actually serve the real world? And fundamentally, how can we make money? So take fast commercialization. So what I mean by fast is they're not thinking in terms of decades, they're thinking about things in terms of years, if you're lucky. If you're a publicly traded company, they're thinking in terms of quarters, in terms of where funding is going and what the future of the companies look like. Currency in terms of tech is IP protection. So that's in stark contrast, right? Publication is you want to put everything out there. IP protection is, right, it's mine. The common term you'll hear from Silicon Valley or the stock market is, what's your moat? Company has a moat. This is my IP. No one can come in. No one can play. I'm going to make money from this, right? And then instead of peers, you have the market. The market is what's driving that thought process and driving that commercialization. And fundamentally, the market doesn't tend to appreciate or understand the underlying tech that goes into developing all these great innovations. And will normally scoff at it and not really care. Think antibiotics, guys, right? So very different ways of thinking, very different ways of how they approach it. So fundamentally, when anyone is looking at how you create a collaboration between these two opposing thinking industries, or industry and academia, they need to think about how to speak to the other side. And so this is advice you can give to anyone from starting their early days in career, or even people who are seasoned academics. Fundamentally, if you can't speak the same language of the people you're trying to get into a collaboration, then the magic won't happen, right? Industry and collaboration can be a very strong bit of work that can join together to do some great stuff. But if you can't speak the same language and you can't align on certain things, then it's just fundamentally not going to work. And the way I see this play out is really around two things. Really, it's the different timelines and priorities. So again, remember I was thinking long-term impact versus short-term. It almost goes unspoken in a lot of conversations I have and have been in part of when you have academics and industry people talking, but they usually miss the point of how long some sort of work is going to take. So be clear up front. I think that's always fundamentally, if you can manage those expectations, talk about, right, this is how long it's going to take, this is the priorities that we want to have, this is how you industrial partners can make money. Money is not a dirty word. You have to talk to the people where they are. You're going to meet them where they are, and manage those expectations. Be like, right, this is what us as the academic partners want to get out of it. This is what you in industry want to get out of it. Correct? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Understand where people are coming from and understanding what their priorities. I would say that 90% of how you're going to make a collaboration work is just speaking to the people on the other side of the aisle in the way they need to hear it, right? And so that's the challenge, and it's quite difficult. And I don't always see it working well from both sides. But then the question goes, well, why does industry want to collaborate with academia? And fundamentally, you can boil it down in terms of these aspects. You've got, as an academic institution, cutting edge facilities that cost millions, tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions. And if you think about it, how many companies around the world have access to such equipment? Only the big boys, and no one wants to play with the big boys. So take advantage of that. You're in a certain location that has facility, infrastructure. It's incredibly expensive for companies to have such things. Likewise, cheap labor. PhDs, academics are relatively inexpensive, right? So look, I'll give you an example. My junior engineers could be on 30 to 40K a year. My mids can be 40 to 50K a year salaries. My seniors can be 60, 70, 80, right? How much does a PhD student cost? Very little, in comparison, a fraction of these. And to be honest, they usually work just as hard. So, take advantage of that you've got some passion, which is good, and you can offer this at a very competitive price. And then some companies also see the prestige of working in academic institutions. Not everyone, but definitely those that are more tech-driven, those that have a brand that is about scientific excellence or approved by science. You can maybe start thinking of some of the companies I might be talking about. There is a prestige about working in academia, right? So the pro tip, and I'm going to have a few pro tips as we go here because I like to keep things succinct, is you got to think about your value and the value you can offer in any collaboration, right? A collaboration essentially is a bit like a transaction. It's like, what am I going to give you? What are you going to give me? Let's put it on the table and let's make something great here. So leverage the fact that you're part of a prestigious academic institution. Leverage the fact that you're relatively inexpensive and that you've got that expertise, and you've also got a network of other intelligent people immediately around you, sometimes next door. And yeah, you're cheap, which is good. So, thoughts? Questions? Anyone want to say anything? Yes.
So you have the slide on why industry collaborates with academia, or why the way around? Why should academia collaborate with industry?
So that's a very good question, actually. So most of the time, it comes down to access to more funding, right? Remember how I said things are knowledge-based, long-term, etc. Sometimes, and we'll talk about funding in a moment, but sometimes there's funding that academics don't get without industrial partners. And that is by design. That's more on the smaller companies. The larger companies, big pharmaceutical companies or what have you, they'll sometimes even just give money to academics to develop certain tech. Obviously, in exchange for the IP, let's not joke ourselves, but it's still more funding. So fundamentally, that's why. But also, some academics will want to have that feedback, shall we call it, from industry. Some are happy to spend their entire lifetimes developing something that's so niche and so novel that it may see the light of day before they retire. Others maybe are a little bit more entrepreneurial by nature and want to see something that's been developed, but then also that could spin out into a potential company. Founder of KYMIRA, myself to some degree. I wanted to see my work get into the hands of people and make an impact beyond just publications and so forth. Does that answer your question? Anyone else?
We have a question from online.
Oh, I think you were first. So let's go with yourself.
No, I mean, you mentioned IP. So how about publishing? So do you think there's a bit of a conflict if you want to publish findings, innovations from a partnership with a private organization with an IP on the product?
So there is sometimes some contentions, but not necessarily on what you mentioned. So don't forget that when you're trying to protect IP, fundamentally, you're telling people how you did it. That's how you can protect IP. So you almost ask, well, what's the difference between a publication and IP protection? Publication is right. Here's everything I did. Tell me how I did it. Tell me what I did. Give me feedback, etc. Give them everything. IP is a little bit more narrow, but it's also a, hey, here's how I did it. Back off, right? So usually if there's any contention, it's usually around timing of publication versus timing of IP protection, because essentially, and there's a little bit of technical, you don't want to have published the works before you make your IP protection, because otherwise it's known as being in the public domain. If something's in the public domain, there's no protection. And there's copyright protection and all that, but that doesn't stop the manufacturing process from taking place. Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how does the IP take? How long does it take?
It can be relatively quick, because fundamentally it doesn't need to be patented. It doesn't need to be patented before publication can take place. I could literally submit it into the UK IPO. Let's say I'm doing a UK patent. I can submit it to the UK IPO, and then a publication or presentation can happen the next day. Because fundamentally, when the patent application goes through the pending, review, granted, what's known as a priority date is the date I filed it. So that's the key date, not through the process. So as soon as it's filed, usually the companies go forth and talk about it.
What if it got rejected?
Yeah.
Well, then it got rejected. Now, usually patents get rejected because someone else already came up with your idea before you did. Shucks. Literally, sometimes by a few days apart. It's horrible when it happens. But fundamentally, that's usually the reason why a patent gets rejected.
Would it be just required some modification?
That's still fine. Usually, the technique for patents is that I should have that side on patents here. But fundamentally, when you put in a patent application, you try to be as broad as possible.
Yeah.
And then the examiners will go, yeah, no, that's prior art from something in the 1980s. That's prior art from something that Apple are doing, so don't even try. And here's some other prior art. And then you kind of go, okay, fine. What if we just get rid of those and then narrow it? And then it becomes a little bit of a back and forth to the UK IPO, and usually they'll go, all right, you've narrowed it enough. We'll grant it. We'll grant it for you.
But the original
date is still the date, exactly.
Even after the modification.
Yeah. Now, if you need to make substantial modifications, you can apply for what's known as a divisional patent, where you've got your main patent, but then you want to take a little bit of the tech and expand on that in a new divisional patent. Now, what happens is that when you file the divisional patent, that's the new priority date. But because you've already spoken about it, you refer to your own previous patent as the prior art, but it's still all protected. It becomes a patent family. Any big organization will have what are known as patent families, hundreds, even thousands of patents. And the best way to think about a patent when you're an organization is that a single patent is like a brick. You can't build a wall with just one brick, right? So if you want to build a defensive wall that no one can enter, right, versus just go around, you need a few bricks. Quite a few bricks, actually. So the value of patents are that. Don't waste money on patents if you're only going to intend to file one. Yeah? Better keep it a trade secret if you're doing something in materials or software and things like that, to be completely honest. That's my advice.
Okay, but we've got a question online.
Yes.
Tim, do you want to unmute yourself?
Grand, yeah, thanks, Phil. Do you see a difference between the types of expertise that you get between academia and industry?
Yes. but it's almost more in terms of, well, it's more in terms of, let's say, people skills. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but for example, the techies who are working in an industry usually get the game. They understand that they're in an industry, they need to make money, and they need to develop something that's good enough, not perfect. Typically, what I see a bit more from the academic space is people are obsessed with perfection. Right? I see a lot of nodding heads, so times haven't changed. Am I right? So those are fundamentally the difference. But in terms of technical expertise, sure, some people probably, if they've been working all the time in a laboratory setting, for example, in a professional institution, they'll have a little bit more understanding of certain tech or certain protocols or even ISO standards as to how to conduct yourself. Whereas the industry people get a little bit more focused on things that their industry are interested in. So they're not working to certain ISO standards or completely different ISO standards. Or if they're more, let's say, developing software for application and normal people using it, not techies using it, then that's usually where some of these things are different, but those aren't substantial. The substantial is the people aspect, the understanding of fundamentally how you need to conduct yourself from a tech development point of view. Right. I love all these questions, guys. Don't be shy. I can always speed up my talk. Right. So let's talk about funding and investment. I think a lot of people are already familiar with this sort of aspect, so I will actually skip through a few parts. But look, funding and investment is what I'd call your table stakes. Anyone heard the expression your table stakes? It's the things you need to bring to the table as a minimum requirement to have something happen. I love that table stakes actually comes from poker, by the way, so it's gambling. And R&D can be gambling. So I always thought it was quite appropriate that this is how we refer to it. But essentially, there's different sources of funding. I'm sure all of you are well aware of things like EPSRC, MRC, even possibly KTPs, knowledge transfer partnerships. The funding that usually is not open to academics, if you recall your previous question, is things like Innovate UK funding. So Innovate UK funding, usually academics can participate and they get 100% funding as you would with any of the other ones, but you need tech to lead. You need the industry to lead. Why? Because the government wants to improve the economy and make money, not necessarily just fund the research, right? So I've personally been involved in raising about 7.8 million, which sounds like a lot. It's not. It disappears very quick. And these are your sources of funding that are typically accessible to most academics or industry partners. You have things like equity investment. Now, while a lot of you may go, oh, equity investment, putting money into a business is not really for me. Well, I know a lot of spin-out organizations where academics have decided to spin out an organization partly owned by the university, possibly partly owned by some other entities, to then develop the tech that the university is developing to then try to sell. That could usually be materials, new materials, or what have you. Because the university itself is not set up to be a commercial organization. So some more savvy universities will understand that, let's spin out different universities, take a stake in it, not large, that's how you negotiate. And then, they can still benefit from the research they're doing. So I've been involved in some of these, mostly around the angel investors. So these are individuals rather than huge organizations, simply because they're quicker. You can get money a lot faster by convincing someone with a lot of money rather than trying to get a venture capitalist or the VC to part ways with their money. And then finally, partnerships and licenses. This is a weird mid-ground where universities can coordinate with industry to do things like part-funded PhDs or to license some tech they've developed to industry or vice versa. And value in kind contributions where, for example, they win some EPSR funding. I'm sure a lot of you already know this one. And then you have industrial partners who will offer you, whether it's advice or tech or platform or whatever, value in kind. So those are really good. And don't scoff at this one. I've had the case where we've part funded now 3 PhDs. And it was great. It's cheap, relatively speaking, and there's a lot of great work that happens. Not to mention, for a small company, patents, publications, brand awareness, that's all part of the prestige. Hey, we're working with this university, and it's great. Please invest in us, right? And as I mentioned, our journey was around the angel investment and match funding, and it does actually become a bit of a snowball effect. As soon as you start winning some funding, all of a sudden you can win some more. Your name starts to get out there. People want to come work for you. They want you to join their bids for grant funding. So there can be a little bit of a snowball effect here, which is great. So bear that in mind, but there is a bit of a dark side to that. And so let's get to my pro tip 2. Don't chase the gold. right? Set clear goals. Decide what it is that your research is supposed to do, and try to align yourself to the funding competitions, the industry partners, fellow academics who continue that journey. It's very easy to sort of meander your way, going for wherever the money can quickly come. So it's really important to focus on what advances your mission, right? And I say your underline because it's not your supervisor's mission, it's not your professor's mission, it's not your head of department's mission or your university's mission, it's your mission. What are you trying to achieve? You know your work. Trust your gut. If a collaboration doesn't feel right, or if it's not the way to do it, speak up. So that's pro tip 2. Pro tip 3, learn how to be storytellers. All of fundraising, all of collaborations, all of working with people is about storytelling. If you can tell a good story, if you can tell a compelling story, especially if it's clear, if you've set clear goals, the story becomes really clear, then you engage with people. Right? The biggest mistake I see that happens, especially from some people earlier trying to raise funding, is they put everything down on a bid that seems a bit incoherent when you actually read it. And to them, it makes sense because it's all their work. It's everything there in their head dumped on a metaphorical piece of paper. No one uses paper anymore. But you got to tell a story. You got to engage people, right? So learn storytelling. It's a great skill. Take you very far. Questions before I move on? I didn't think there would be so many for funding, but go on.
The role of, especially if you're coming from a purely academic background, about the role of investors as sort of mentors in your business, or whether that's muddying the water.
No, investors usually will want to advise you, especially if you're a bit green behind the ears, because they're giving you their money. They want to make sure you're going to spend it properly. Remember, I said in my first business, you learn what not to do. Well, it's all well and good learning that on someone else's dime, but if you're the person giving the money to the person, you want to make sure to do it right. So look, whenever you have investors, and some of those investors could be the university, if, for example, we're talking about a spin out, do lean on that expertise. They want to see you succeed, because your success is their success. Magic. You're fully aligned. They want you to succeed. You want to succeed. So I wouldn't muddy the waters. In fact, a lot of the more savvy investors will ask for seats on your board when you eventually create a startup, because being on the board means you can exercise day-to-day control. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So do private investors invest on blue sky ideas or innovations, or do they want more certainty?
It depends. There's investors for different stages of an organization. Usually the earliest investors in the organization are referred to as angel investors. Almost this vision of they coming down from the sky. Well, not quite, but essentially they're usually people who have a lot of money, high net worth individuals, or if you ever meet them, ultra high net worth individuals. And they invest in your business because they love your idea and what you're trying to do. They invest in you as an individual. So you could literally be a one-person band with an idea, and you can convince someone, and they go, okay, I'll give you 200,000, $500,000. Make something happen, and then maybe they invest some more. Again, they'll almost like your patron, if you think back to earlier days, right? They'll literally give you money to try to make it happen because they're passionate about it. Those are great early investors. Usually they come in on what's known your seed round. So your seed round is after you've exhausted all of your friends, family, and fools in your life to give you your 5K, 10K. Please, mommy and daddy, give me 10K to start my own business. So once you've exhausted those, seed money comes in, and then maybe there's a few more rounds of that, and then eventually you'll get to what's known, well, if you survive long enough, let's say, you'll get to what's known as your Series A, where it's your first actual investment round that involves institutions. And institutions are basically hired people that take care of other people's money. So they're a lot harder to convince because their bonuses are tied to how good you are. So don't mess with people's bonuses. High net worth, if he's already given you, let's say, $500,000, he's willing to lose it. Is that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or shall we?
So do you give equity away then for every single
Yes.
funding round?
That's how it works. But hey, ultimately, if you're a founder, this is the dilemma, right? It's do you want to have a bigger piece of a smaller cake or a smaller piece or a bigger cake? And it is actually a dilemma that even faces myself and the founder nowadays. It's like, well, how much equity, how much of the ownership of the company are we willing to give away? And usually you have to balance out, well, will it mean we'll grow faster? Will it mean we'll de-risk things, achieve success? Ultimately, that's the dilemma that comes down to. But yes, that's one good thing of grant funding. It's not equity diluting. So if you look at what I mentioned, 7.8 million and 6.2, the 6.2, yeah, we have to give away shares now. The 7 point, nope. Which is great. Thank you, government. Yeah. But that's what innovation funding looks like in developed countries, right? So fundamentally, you throw a little bit of spare change. Let's be honest, it's spare change for something as big as a government or a country, and you might make the next big company. The US have been doing it for decades, and look how successful they've been. We not so much. We don't throw as much as they do, but we don't have that much. Any other questions? Cool. Product evaluation and commercialization. So by product development, I do really mean sort of technology development. So I wanted to touch on this because they're very two different routes and approaches when you look at academia and industry. Remember I said academia, there's a bit of this perfectionist way of thinking. Industry is a bit more of, okay, what's good enough that we can sell and we can just patch it later kind of thing. And so when you're looking at early stage validation, there's the academic validation and the market validation. So what I mean by academic validation is you've got a theory, classic, right? You've got a theory, you got to prove that it works. Or the null hypothesis. Let's not get too technical. But you have a theory, you want to prove it works. Market validation is, right, is someone going to pay for it? Right? And so question, hands up who thinks market validation is more important and who think, so hands up, market validation more important, hands up who thinks academic validation more important.
I think one without the other means that you can't then have a viable product in the end.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes, ultimately, they're both important. And it really depends who you ask as well, fundamentally. But you will notice, and we notice this ourselves, you end up bouncing between academic validation and market validation. So we first tested stuff on ourselves, no ethics needed. Then we find people who are volunteers to test stuff on them, and then again, then you bounce back and forth. It's like, well, we think it's great. Is it great? And no, can you change this? Okay, let's get some feedback. Well, does that feedback change the scientific principles underlying the test? So you do end up going back and forth between academic and market validation. And how much, when you get a bit bigger, you do of one versus the other is quite simple. Is your brand or is the tech you're developing, does it require that academic validation? Does it require that scientific stamp of approval? We tend to we look at science as almost like this is dogmatic. So if something is approved by science, there's an automatic belief, credibility, right? It works. So there's definitely value in that, but at the same time, it's worth nothing if you can't sell it. No one's willing to buy it. So for us, I already alluded to this in the beginning. We started out with this infrared technology, which, by the way, I'm actually wearing it. By the way, so this is one of our tech. It's keeping me nice and limber, despite the 3 a.m. wake up from my kids.
You're healing yourself.
Sorry?
You're healing.
I'm literally healing myself from the trauma of having kids. It's a long process. But essentially, we started with a technology that, from an academic standpoint, was destined for wound healing, wound dressing. Wow. But it's like, okay, has anyone ever tried? I'm sure all of you have, but who's done ethics submissions, ethics applications? Yeah? Yeah, fun. Anyone done MHRA, like actual government medical device stuff? Horrible, painful process. Imagine when you're just two people starting out, not possible. So essentially, we said, right, let's go for the unregulated market of sports, wellness, etc., and get people to start using it, feeling the effects, paying us money, and then we can get back to that validation of things. And over the years, we did get to the point where this was submitted for FDA, we got class 1 status, all great, but we did lean on other people to do it. It wasn't just us trying to do it. And then more importantly, as you get to that certification, you've got paying customers. In fact, some of that real world data could be part of your certification application. Look, see, here's the evidence. Obviously, there still needs to be a bit more clinical, but real world data is becoming more and more of a prevalent thing, especially in FDA. Maybe not around here yet, but it is important, and that helps. That's how you can navigate the regulations. So collaborating with industry partners, getting a little bit more into the weeds of, okay, well, how does the collaboration work when you're thinking about development or commercialization? So the first question you got to ask whenever you're trying to do something here is, when you get a team, are you the problem solver or the sense maker? Now, what I mean by that is, are you the person who's going to solve this specific problem and make an impact? Or are you the person who's going to work with all the different people to figure out how to make the best output, the best result? And this is a big struggle I see. And by the way, I see this even in academic institutions, when someone who, for example, has been a lecturer or a professor, well, more a lecturer doing a lot of the work, and then they need to get into professorships or more administrative things like deans and heads. They don't understand that they're shifting from the problem solver to the sense maker. They don't solve the problems anymore. They delegate. They make sense of the problems. The value you bring as someone who's leading a collaboration is that you make sense of it, and you put your head above the parapet to see what's happening. If you get stuck in the weeds, who's driving the ship? So very important to understand your role here. And it's not a binary. There's a bit of okay, I'm doing something, but there's only so much I can do. I need other people. Well, I need to monitor them. I need to manage them. Because it's my vision. You want to share that vision. You want to tell a good story. But it's not always easy. People aren't easy. So very important to understand where you come in here. A great program for something like this is, for example, knowledge transfer partnerships. We've had three in the past. And the associate, as I know in the knowledge transfer partnership, starts out as the problem solver, but they slowly become the sense maker. And it's a great journey to see over a 2 or 3 year program, because ultimately they're the link between the academic institutions, knowledge transfer, and the industry partners. And they need to basically go around, talk to people, collaborate, network, all of those soft skills that no one really teaches you. You're gonna have to just do it. And likewise, even in internally funded projects, whether it's in academic institutions or industrial, you need to become a person who's pulling people in to the idea, to the vision, to make it work. So my pro tip here, learn how to negotiate with industry, even internally. Negotiation is an interesting art form. It is fundamentally communication, but it's transactional communication. And look, you're all smart people. You spend hours researching things you're passionate about. Read a book, read a couple of books on negotiation. You understand how to communicate, and you understand the fine art of, okay, I'll give you this, you give me that, how we're going to make this work. You'll go a long way. I'll give you a classic example that actually happened to us. So we were forming an academic collaboration with another university, which shall be unnamed. But essentially, a software academic, classic academic, very passionate about what he developed, and the material, the tech, etc. And we were talking about things, and I wanted to get some of the tech for myself, try it out in the organization, maybe try it as part of a project. And it became a classic. And it's like, okay, cool. So how much does this cost you to make? And he told me, whoops. Shouldn't have told me how much it costs to make, because now I know, oh, is that it? And he's like, yeah, and look, I'll make as many as you want for you. Oh, really? Just like that? Yep, okay. Nope. No, because what happens then? He goes, tells his professor, tells us, okay, yeah, we got someone who's willing to pay for this. And then it's like, oh yeah, and they're only going to pay this much. It's like, why? It's because that's what you said they were going to pay. Like, no, it's a classic mistake. When you negotiate, you need to be able to just be aware of what is the value that you're offering here. If you don't value what you're offering, then no one else will. Yeah, and also understand your constraints. If you're a PhD or an employee of a institution, yeah, they're gonna probably want to put some overheads, rental, etc. So don't be naive to these things. And look, if you're not confident doing negotiations, speak to the lawyers, speak to the senior professors, and what have you. But don't be shy of it. Get used to it. Yeah, it's definitely another one of those things that will take you far. Any questions before I move on to career?
I've got a question. I don't know if you want to leave this answer to the end, but I think you mentioned about all these skills, like negotiation skills and storytelling.
Okay.
Were you born with these skills?
No.
And what did you do to kind of develop? Did you just develop them by making mistakes, or did you train to get this skill? Did you get some coaching or training?
So a lot of mistakes. So if you met me when I was a teenager, you would think I'm a different person, because it's just my personality wasn't like that. The mere thought of standing up, even to talk to a crowd of this size, is just like, palpitations. You panic. But as with most things that you're scared of, especially, the more you do it, the more your brain realizes you're not going to die. So do more. So you're kind of more comfortable doing it. In fact, even opportunities like this, getting a little bit meta here, but I actively take opportunities to speak up and talk to people because I'm still practicing. You don't stop practicing until you're dead, frankly. So, you make the mistakes. You always got to be ready to make mistakes. Make the mistakes, practice. If there's any training or coaching or etc. you can do, that's fine. But fundamentally, don't fall into the classic trap intelligent people do, which is they think that they get comfortable gathering information, right? It's a classic thing, which I also fall foul to sometimes, but it's like, I'll gather as much information on a topic like negotiation. I'm going to be the best negotiator by sitting down and watching YouTube videos, reading all the books. Okay, great. You have all the knowledge, but then I put you in front of something, no idea what to do, right? So you gotta learn. There's aspects theory you can learn, but fundamentally you gotta get out there. Take speaking slots. Take opportunities to be involved in negotiations. Don't let the lawyers do all the sit there, watch, listen, understand what's happening. Watch things online that show you how other people have done it. But you gotta practice. You gotta practice. I remember a quote which has stuck with me over the years. It's knowledge and wisdom without action. Sorry, knowledge without action is not wisdom, it's trivia. You gotta put what you know into action, and that's how you learn.
Okay.
Any more? Yes.
When you were getting started, so freshly, not the previous teenage years,
Yeah.
were you part of any sort of entrepreneurship groups where you could
Nope.
get that practice and make those mistakes and same thing? No.
No, frankly, no. In a way, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but in a way, it was kind of just jumping at the deep end. I remember in one of the first conversations we were having for this product we were developing. So just for context, so it's an acoustic amplifier for mobile phones that we developed back in 2012. So this is my first business. This was back when we had Galaxy S2s. Anyone remember those? Awful speakers, horrible. They had the speaker on the back, so if you actually put it on a table, it just got muffled. Anyway, so we developed this acoustic sound amplifier that would do it all with the shape of the case, and it's great, physics simulations, all of that stuff. Obviously boring. No one cares about how we got it there, but it was working. One of the first meetings we had was with the CEO of a company called Gear 4, and he saw fresh guys. All right, let's talk. And it was scary. It was very scary. But yeah, you do that, and then you're kind of like, oh wow, okay, I learned something. Don't just go into a meeting like that half-cocked, not knowing what you're gonna do. It's like, right, so where's the product? Oh, we left it in our dorm. You came to this to pitch me about a product. You didn't have a product. It's like, oh, so yeah, we have a few embarrassing moments. I mean, I didn't die, so still here. But yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you're not learning. Yes.
You talked about assessing like market value. How to do that when you're like still in the sort of like more academic mindset and starting out?
So Google helps. Have a bit of a look at what other products or similar products online, of other industries do, especially if they're public companies. If they're public companies, there's reams of reports about how their business fundamentally operates, which, by the way, you don't need to read nowadays. Just put it into chatbot and it'll tell you the details. Basically, we live in an era where information is incredibly abundant. The challenge is how to sift through the information. The challenge is how to ask the right questions. So that's a good question. How do you find out what something costs? If, let's say you've made a new material, well, what does it cost? Many ways of doing it. Costing strategies, pricing strategies. What does 3M? How does 3M cost this? How does Google cost some piece of electronic tech? you just got to ask the right questions. The information is out there. It's actually crazy how much information is out there if you're willing to look for it. And as I said before, I already said this, you're all very clever people. You're all literally trained in how to do research. Do research. I know it's simple, but it's powerful stuff when you actually get started. Yeah. Yes.
When you said about starting a new company or starting some new fund and all this, I'm always worried about if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
How bad it can be. It can go as a person, not as a company. You know how that can affect my personal, for example, savings or something like that.
Yeah.
Or are there some safe nets on all of this process?
Yeah. So fundamentally, you want to, and I'd say this to anybody, start what's known as a limited company. So limited stands for limited liability. So basically that means that whatever company you create is a separate legal entity to you. And that's fundamentally very important. And you also got to think like that, right? Separate bank accounts, separate whatever. So basically, whatever you put into the company is what's up for loss. So as long as you're not doing something illegal, put that little star there. It's like, no, okay, let's just go do. No, you gotta be trading properly. You can't do wrongful trading. If you become a director of that company that you form, which you don't have to be, you can just be a shareholder, completely hands off. But if you become a director, which means you are in charge and you have ultimate responsibility, you got to behave with a certain duty of care. You got to behave with a certain integrity, objectivity, etc. But as long as you're doing that, your losses will be limited to whatever you invested in the company. And obviously, if you're paying yourself a salary, well, that'll go. But that's fine. Get another job. Yeah. So limited companies are great as long as you stay on the right side of the law. The only real fear that I think a lot of people have once they understand fundamentally that a limited company protects you financially is maybe reputational. But imagine one of your colleagues came to you and he's like, "Yeah, I tried this business and it didn't work." You probably go, "Whoa, you tried a business? That's awesome. Tell me about it." You actually probably get more of like, well done for stepping out of the little chicken coop and actually going out in the real world. And look, the younger you are in your career, the more expected you are to experiment and try mistakes. So do it. Trust me, it becomes a lot easier before you have the mortgage, the wife, and the kids, right? But even if you're past that, there's no harm trying. The worst that could happen is it fails.
There are some presidents that had some failures and it didn't matter in the past.
No, exactly. It doesn't matter. I mean, look, here's a statistic for you. We love statistics and science. 90% of all companies that start will fail in the first 10 years. 60% of those will fail in the first 3 years. So you are actually statistically expected to fail. So don't worry. You're more likely than not going to fail. But then you learn something, and it's amazing. And even if you say, right, wow, startup, that was hard. I'm not doing that again. Imagine you go to a job application, be like, right, yeah, so I did that. And doing that, I learned how to negotiate. I learned how to storytell. I raised this much money on my own back. I worked hard. I did it. As an employer, speaking as an employer, did you go, great? Because it's very hard to teach that. In a way, you can, you can get a degree almost easier than you can learning this really core fundamental stuff to become an amazing person in your career, etc. Yep. So actually, nice segue into career, right? Right. So I talk a bit about PhDs because in this section a bit more because I think PhDs are probably in more of that early flexible stage of their career, but a lot of this can fundamentally go to any stage of your career. Maybe not if you're like a year from retirement, maybe not that. But it depends how old you are. But fundamentally, if you look at stepping away from academia, I'm not promoting you do that, by the way. Academia is very stable route as well. But if, for example, anyone was more interested in wetting their whistle around industry or entrepreneurship, the real choices are, well, do you want to join a big company that's stable, boring? That's an opinion. But stable and have money, so you're not struggling. Or do you want to be looking at either starting a business or joining a very young business? And by a young business, I mean less than 10 people, less than $1 million turnover a year, right? Reality is hard. It's very hard to start your own business. But one of the hardest things you're going to do It's high risk. Remember the statistic, you're more likely to fail than you are to succeed, but it's potentially a high reward, and high reward both in terms of learning and development, as well as, I mean, if you're part of that 10% that actually succeed, you're kind of set for life. But regardless, it is hard. It's very hard. Long hours, grueling way of working, etc. So it's not something that's for everyone, but I'd always recommend try it. You know, you can almost say the same thing about university to some degree. You learn a lot about yourself, even if you don't necessarily finish the degree. Shame you didn't. It costs a lot, but I could say the same thing about some startups. So for those looking to go into more smaller organization, and this could be a little bit for medium-sized organizations as well, but what do people look for? Again, I said PhD graduates, but this could apply to really anyone. And that's what I call the T-shaped professional. So someone who is deeply expertise in some area, but then can sort of do a lot up here, generalist stuff. So that's a really good way to sit. Remember what I said, you can't do everything, but if you're a really good problem solver, great, but you're also happy to send emails, have meetings with people, set up things, project manage, collaborate, etc. If you can do all of these soft skill stuff, and you're also a great techie, you're a unicorn. Most people are usually one or the other. So if you can practice now, those soft skills I keep mentioning, and get comfortable doing them, get comfortable being uncomfortable, quote, then you'll get to that. So that's a really powerful place to be. Okay, and now to highlight the transferable skills, I think it's really important. And I'll take these one by one. So problem solving, critical thinking, and data analysis. This is your bread and butter. I expect all of you are very good at this already. But essentially, this is really powerful stuff, even though you do this every day. If you can do this well, you're probably in the 4% of the population that actually can do that. So just you know, you guys are amazing. Don't forget that. And this is an interesting other side of that skill, knowing the importance of when you need to make gut decisions and when you can make data-driven decisions. So a really good framework to think about this is, has anyone come across reversible and irreversible decision-making as a framework? Yeah. So it's fundamentally that if you have a dilemma, and this happens a lot, where you don't have all the information in front of you to make a decision like perfectly, you got to ask yourself, if I make the decision, can I immediately pull it back? Like a reversible decision. It could be simple as, okay, I'll do a quick experiment with a few friends in the back. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it didn't cost you anything. It was easy. It was a reversible decision. Don't spend too much time on those. Make reversible decisions as many as you can. Because if it doesn't work out, okay, we'll just throw it back. And then you have irreversible decisions. Those are not purely irreversible, but they cost a lot of money to reverse. So think, I don't know, buying a house. Yeah, so if you're going to make an irreversible decision, don't do them quick. Do them slowly. Think about it, get your data, talk to peers, get advice. But if you fundamentally can categorize every decision you make with imperfect data as either reversible or irreversible, you can spend 90% of your time quickly going through the decisions that don't really cost anything to do, and then really focusing on the ones that matter. And trust me, if you can do that well, then you're going to get through so much decisions. It'll be great. So that's a very good skill to know. Don't linger too much if you don't have all the data. Sometimes just gotta go for it. Collaboration, independence, and initiative. Look, 2 out of 3 you guys already have. Independence, you have to be independent, right? You're doing a PhD, a postdoc, or what have you. An initiative, you gotta be passionate about the work you're gonna do. Then you're gonna do it. Then you're gonna own it. The most important thing, and the one that's probably lacking with some people, is collaboration, people, negotiation, storytelling. Things I've been sort of banging on about. Maybe we'll get in. It's very important to work with people, to collaborate with people. If you can get people together, all aligned under the same arrow, going in a certain direction, you'll do amazing things. Because then you leverage the power of everyone, not just you as an individual. You can only do so much. 10 of you, wow, change the world. And finally, grit. Remember I said PhD is startup is hard? Well, PhD is hard as well. It takes a lot of perseverance to do the work. And in a way, the skills you learn, you know, how to keep on going, even though you don't feel like it, and working under this sort of pressure, a lot of it self-imposed, is not too unlike a startup. So, recognize that. I said startup is hard. Yeah, PhD is hard as well. So you'll get similar battle scars when you end up talking to any entrepreneurs as well. An opinion, obviously. So I believe that business skills matter just as much as technical expertise when you're looking at dealing with people. Now, look, if you just want to create impact for yourself and you're happy being just you, a team of one, that is perfectly valid way to live. There's no problem at all. But more often than not, in the real world, you have to interact with people. You have to transact with people. You have to collaborate with people. You need to be able to develop those soft skills. I call them business skills because a lot of it comes from business. You're mostly going to practice these in a business environment where, you got to get people on side and aligned to an idea, a way of thinking. So technical is great, but you're already very smart. Start practicing those business skills. So pro tip number 5, learn finance. I know, I was already like, oh, finance? Oh, no. Learn finance, even if it's just the basics. Cash flow, budgeting, investment strategy, financial planning, they make or break businesses. Fundamentally, you cannot get around it. You're either going to understand how finance works, and by the way, this also works in academic projects, or you can be blind to it, but you will be affected by it no matter what. So you might as well pay attention. Again, information is out there. Just start searching, ask the right questions. Pro tip 6, understand business fundamentals. Now, what do I mean by fundamentals? I'm sure you've heard this before. What's business fundamentals? Basically, it's the thing that gives the idea or the business or the venture value. How does it operate? Like you can go on Bloomberg, the stock market, and you can see stocks go up and down all the time, every day. That doesn't say anything about the business fundamentals. So basically, how does a business make money? Why does it make money? What's its risks? How sensitive is it to things like downturns or whatever? So if you can understand this, you can also be better enabled to select the businesses or industries you want to work with when you collaborate. And speak to them on their level, like, oh, your main priority is these kind of customers. Well, this is how our research can support that bit of work. Understand the other side, how the business thinks, what makes them great, and how money works. And finally, banging on about the people aspects, aren't I? It's awful. But I appreciate politics and leadership matter. Now, what do I mean by politics and leadership? Look, as soon as you have more than one person in a room, there's going to be politics. Politics is not a bad word. Politics is all about your agenda, my agenda. How do we make this work? How do we make this mess work, right? And a lot of how you make it work, besides understanding everyone's agenda, is leadership. Leadership is how you get those 10 people all aligned and working together. So this one is probably the hardest one. I've had to deal with politics and leaderships aspects on a small scale, on a slightly larger scale. The higher the stakes get, the crazier it can become. And it comes, I mean, the best dramatization of it is House of Cards, if anyone remembers that from the 10s, right? From Netflix in the 2010s. That is crazy. You're never going to interact with that, unless you really want to go into that kind of politics. But on a small level, there's a lot of that. The meetings before the meetings happen. The back channeling. Listen, I've got this idea. What do you think? Oh yeah, who should I talk to? Oh yeah, good. I'll go talk to them. Yeah, that's just part of the game. So don't be shy of it. Practice. All comes down to practice and read a book. So before I get to the main Q&A, quick summary, right? So transitioning from academic research and getting that into commercialization is tough. It's sort of my story and my background, but it's possible. But you may fail, but that's fine. That's part of the game. Collaboration between academia and industry can be very powerful, but you got to make the magic happen. You got to be aligned. And sometimes it is just on you to make that happen. Not your professor, not your super, they're all busy. Sometimes it'll just be you to make that happen. Funding is a major hurdle, but everyone knows that. And there's lots of ways to go about it. Grants, partnerships, investors, etc. Speak to any department in the university that deals with funding. They might actually be able to help with aspects like this. And finally, look, your academic work is a launch pad. You're that expertise, that vertical line of that T-shaped model. And if you can start applying your skills a bit more on the soft side of things, oh, you'll do great things. Great things. Final pro tip. Promise, final one. Own what you do fully. So this comes back to your mission and what you're doing. Don't do anything that's sort of half measure or half cocked. If you're going to do something and it aligns with your vision, put all of yourself into it. And if you have to do something you don't want to do, or that you have to do because, I don't know, your supervisor tells you have to do this, either fight it or just do it fully. Don't do something in between. You'll hate yourself for it. Trust me. So own what you do. And look, if you're trying to form a collaboration, if you're trying to do something, if you're trying to change the world, you got to do it. It's on you. You can rely on people for support. You can rely on people to sort of give you advice, but they're not going to do it for you. You got to do it. It's only on you. Only you can change your world. And that's it. Right, questions? We don't have so much time, but I'm happy to stick around as long as anyone else wants to.
Feel free to dash up if you've got.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you find that in your experience, the people in industry kind of are aware of the kind of skills that academics develop naturally throughout a PhD? And I guess tied to that, what would you think would be the best ways to communicate that? Because I think some of it's quite, unless you're doing the things, like academic paper writing and ethics and everything, it's quite hard to communicate that outside of academia.
Yeah, no, it depends. I think that no one fully understands what a PhD does until you do one yourself, fundamentally. But I think don't assume. Always ask questions or tell people, storytelling, right? Or get people to tell you. You'll be surprised if you start asking poignant questions to people in industry, academia, whatever, how much they'll tell you. That's kind of like step one in a lot of negotiation. Understand the other person's side. Is that?
Yeah.
Let's say a person recently finished a PhD, should they do like a postdoc first before moving to industry, or is that perfect time? Like if they stay in industry for too long, is that bad? I mean, stay in academia too long after the PhD, is that bad?
So it's difficult because the best route to take depends on your destination. What do you want to do? What do you want to own fully? And by the way, that doesn't mean if you make a plan for your life, big stuff, right? But if you make a plan for your life, that plan needs to be able to change the next day, right? I don't remember the exact quote, but basically it was something around how planning is a fantastic thing to do, but a plan is useless, because it's a thing you've thought about in the past, but you always need to be updating your plan. Don't be afraid to change your plan. Changing your plan is completely fine. Reversible, irreversible decisions, right? So the question of, should I do this, or should I do this, or should I do this, or should I do this? What's your destination? That's how then you can work backwards to figure out what are the steps you need to take. And again, if let's say you have some crazy idea, like I want to be the chief technology officer of Apple, fantastic. Then you're like, okay, how am I going to get there? Figure it out. How do you get there? How the CTO of Microsoft get there? How do you start looking at the trends? Well, pattern recognition machines, right? And if you're boring, ask chatbot. No, really, I know it's a horrible thing to say, but it is a tool that allows things to be a lot quicker. But don't trust everything it says. But do your own research, figure it out, see how other people have done the journey. And look, you can follow the well-trodden path. You can also try to navigate your own path. But at every point, be ready to change the plan. Don't get stuck in your ways. Does that give you some insight?
Yeah.
Great.
You talked about being a master's student and finding an idea to do a startup.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, like, you can have 10 ideas a day. How do you know which idea is going to pursue?
Oh, that's tough. That is really tough. If you're the kind of creative type, and my first business partner was like that, you have all these crazy ideas. I think this comes to the sort of Silicon Valley adage, fail fast, which is basically you have an idea, don't keep it in your head, go ask a friend. And or a few friends, don't only take one data point. Good scientific approach, right? Take a few data points. If they're like, oh my God, it's amazing. The next question is, how much should you pay for it? Yeah. And see what you get. And some people, and you're going to know your friends here who are going to be honest, right? Some people say, that's a terrible idea. Don't do that. Or the other people are going to say, that's really interesting, but I already saw that other startup there doing it. Well, then, okay, let me go talk to them. Do they have any intelligent people to help them? No, they don't. Okay, well, that's a bit of a side hustle I can start. So the moment you start asking questions, and the moment you start getting your thoughts out of your head, opportunities happen. That's the only way opportunities happen. Nothing will fall onto your lap. Nothing. You got to start putting things out there. And don't be scared of expressing ideas, by the way. I think it's a bit of a fear, I think, in a lot of people that they have this great idea and they think, oh, I should better not tell anyone about it because they'll steal it. Other people have their own troubles. They're way too busy to steal your idea. So don't be afraid to just start talking to people. The more you talk to people, the more opportunities you have to find a new avenue or a new door to explore things. That's
based on what you said, when should you be careful about someone stealing your idea?
That's a hard question because it comes back to most people have already a lot on their plate. Think about it. Most people have their own plan, their own vision, their own idea. I think, if, for example, if it's someone who's literally doing the same thing you're doing, and you tell them, here's an idea, and they think, oh, great, I'll do it. Like, yeah, okay, but if I'm an engineer, if I'm an engineering student, I tell a chemistry student about some idea about creating some electronic doohickey that can do mind control. They don't even know where to start. Yeah. So don't worry. The power is in how you execute the idea, not the idea itself. A lot of great ideas come from like sci-fi, but where's my hover car? Execution is the key. Okay, great. Any more questions? In person or digital, virtually? No, everyone's left virtually now.
Still people.
No. All right. Well, look, I think that's probably a good place to stop.